It always starts the same way. Markets are quiet, investors are cautious, and the world seems stable. But then, something changes. Within minutes, defense stocks jump. Within hours, oil prices spike. Within days, entire industries shift gears. And within weeks, war is official. But here's the part nobody tells you. War doesn't create chaos, it creates opportunity. While nations borrow, corporations cash in. While young soldiers march, boardrooms celebrate. And while cities burn, portfolios rise. This isn't a theory, it's a pattern, a cycle that has repeated for centuries, and the same people always win. So the real question isn't who will win this war, it's who's making money from it. Because if you knew the answer, you'd never look at war the same way again. Every war needs two things, a reason and funding. The first one is easy. Politicians will give you a reason. Terrorism, national security, democracy, weapons of mass destruction. They'll sell the story. But the second part, that's where the real game begins. War is expensive, unimaginably expensive. Governments don't have the cash just lying around. So what do? They borrow, they raise taxes, they pass trillion-dollar budgets. And guess who steps in to help? Banks, private lenders, institutions that print money out of thin air and offer it with interest. Every war is fought on credit, and the deeper a country goes into conflict, the deeper it sinks into debt. But here's the trick. The lenders, they don't take sides. History is filled with examples of the same banking institutions funding both sides of a war, because for them, it's not about winning or losing, it's about profit. Now, let's follow the money. The moment a conflict is declared, governments approve new spending, hundreds of billions of dollars poured into military operations. But where does it all go? It goes straight into the pockets of defense contractors, companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman. Their entire business model depends on war. The more conflict, the more demand. The more demand, the higher the stock prices. And the markets, they respond immediately. Defense stocks surge, oil prices rise, and institutional investors, hedge funds, pension funds, billionaires move in to capitalize. But here's where the cycle gets even darker. Once the war is won, and I use that word lightly, who rebuilds the destroyed cities, the broken infrastructure, the collapsed economies? The same corporations that profited from the destruction now profit from the recovery. Government contracts worth billions are handed to private companies to rebuild what was lost. Roads, power grids, oil fields. Ownership shifts from the people to private hands. You see, in this game, someone always has to pay, and it's never the politicians, it's never the bankers, it's never the corporations. It's you, the taxpayer, the worker, the consumer. You pay through inflation, you pay through taxes, you pay through an economy that's drained dry, while those at the top pocket the wealth. And when the next war comes, the same process starts all over again. But what if I told you that war isn't just a business model? What if I told you that some wars aren't even necessary, but they happen anyway, because someone needs them to? Because when war is this profitable, peace is never the goal. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. President Eisenhower. Eisenhower warned us. Nobody listened. The military-industrial complex is not just a theory, it's a trillion-dollar empire. Let's ask a disturbing question. What happens when peace actually breaks out? When war stops, the money stops. And in a system built on endless military spending, that's bad for business. In the 90s, after the Cold War ended, defense spending collapsed. Stock prices fell, think tanks panicked. Less than a decade later, a new enemy emerged, and the machine was back in motion. Do you see the pattern yet? This isn't about defense, it's about maintaining the cycle, because in this system, peace is not profitable. So now we know who profits, we know how the system works, but there's still one more question left to answer. If war is this profitable, should you invest in it? Every war follows the same path: crisis, chaos, profit, And now you have a choice, because in this game, you don't have to be a spectator, you can be an investor. The numbers don't lie. When conflict breaks out, defense stocks surge. In 2001, after 9/11, Lockheed Martin's stock rose over 1,000% in the following years. In 2022, after the Ukraine conflict began, major arms manufacturers saw double-digit gains within weeks. So, does that mean investing in war is just smart business? If profiting from war makes you uncomfortable, what are the alternatives? Historically, these assets surge during conflicts. Gold, safe haven during economic uncertainty. Oil and energy, spikes in wartime due to supply shocks. Commodities, wheat, metals, rare earth materials become strategic resources. This is the safer, more ethical way to hedge against instability. You're not betting on destruction, you're betting on resilience. But let's be honest, most ethical funds still invest in companies with war contracts. Many tech giants, energy firms, and even medical suppliers profit from war in indirect ways. Some people think war can be stopped. The truth, it can't. As long as money is to be made, wars will happen. The real question is, are you willing to be part of the system, or are you going to find a way to outmaneuver it? You don't have to like the system, but you do have to decide, how will you play the game? Because whether you invest or not, someone is profiting.